If you have ever been overshadowed, betrayed by the very person you should have been able to trust, and forced to fight for your own truth against impossible odds, then this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button and settle in, because this is the story of how I unmasked the golden boy. The disciplinary board's office was suffocatingly quiet. 3 professors stared at me with disappointed eyes, my academic career hanging by a single fraying thread. But they weren't looking at the real criminal. He was sitting right next to me, my own brother, wearing a mask of perfect, brotherly concern that I and my family. I was a background character. I was the quiet one, the diligent one, the one you could rely on to pass the salt at dinner without interrupting the main conversation. My brother, Ryan, was the conversation. He was 2 years older, a supernova of charisma and confidence in a universe where I felt like a distant, flickering star. He didn't walk into a room, he made an entrance. His laughter was a booming, infectious thing that drew people in, while mine was a quiet chuckle, usually in response to a line in a book. We both studied at the same university, a fact that my parents announced with pride, though the pride was clearly weighted. We'd come home for a weekend, and the dinner table would become a stage for the Ryan Evans show. "Tell us everything, son," my father would boom, leaning forward with genuine excitement. "How's the rugby team looking this season?" And Ryan would launch into a grand, embellished story about a game-winning tackle or a legendary party, his hands gesturing wildly, his voice filling the house. My parents would hang on his every word, their faces glowing with adoration. When his story was over, my mother would turn to me, her smile still lingering from his performance. "And you, Sophie? Everything all right with your classes?" "They're great," I'd say. I actually got a 98 on my midterm for Professor Albright's class. It's the highest grade he's given in 5 years. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she'd reply, her eyes already drifting back to Ryan. "That's practical. Keep up the good work." That was the word they always used for my achievements. Practical. Nice. Good. Ryan's achievements were spectacular. Incredible. Amazing. He made the dean's list one semester with a B+ average, and they cracked open a bottle of champagne they'd been saving for a special occasion. 6 months later, when I was awarded the prestigious Harrison Grant for Historical Research, a grant that came with a significant scholarship and a letter of commendation from the department head, my father patted me on the shoulder and said, "Well done. That'll look good on a resume." It wasn't that they were cruel. They were just blinded by the dazzling light of their son, the golden boy. I learned early on that competing for the spotlight was a losing game. So I retreated into my own world, the quiet, orderly world of academics. I found my validation not in their applause, but in the hushed halls of the library, in the smell of old books, in the thrill of unearthing a forgotten fact or crafting a perfect sentence. My world was small and silent, but it was mine. The term paper for Professor Albright's class, The Geopolitical Consequences of the Treaty of Westphalia, was supposed to be the crown jewel of my semester. I adored Professor Albright. He was a brilliant, demanding academic who saw the fire in my quiet heart. He saw my passion and he nurtured it. This paper was my chance to show him, and myself, what I was capable of. I didn't just write it, I lived it. I spent weeks buried in the archives, my fingers dusty from turning the fragile pages of 17th century correspondence. I mapped out troop movements on my dorm room floor. I drank so much coffee that my thoughts raced at 3 a.m, connecting disparate ideas into a coherent, original thesis. The final paper was 30 pages of the best work I had ever done. It was more than an assignment. It was a piece of me, a testament to every quiet hour I had ever spent in pursuit of knowledge. I saved the final draft to my flash drive, a little blue stick that held my soul, and I submitted it with a deep sense of pride. A week later, I received an email. The subject line was simply, "Meeting." It was from Professor Albright. I smiled, assuming he wanted to discuss my paper, perhaps even suggest I submit it for publication in the university's academic journal. I walked to his office that afternoon with a light step, a rare feeling of genuine, unadulterated excitement bubbling in my chest. His office, usually a cozy haven smelling of coffee and old paper, felt cold and sterile. He wasn't smiling. He gestured for me to sit, his face grim. "Sophie," he began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "We have a problem. A serious one. My smile faltered. What is it? He slid a printout across his wide oak desk. It was my paper. He then slid another one next to it. This, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, was published 2 years ago in an online historical journal, the European Review of Geopolitical Studies. I looked at the second paper. The title was slightly different. The author's name, Dr. Alistair Finch, meant nothing to me. But as I scanned the first page, the blood drained from my face. Paragraph after paragraph was identical to mine. The sentence structure, the citations, the core of my unique thesis. It was all there. Professor, I don't understand, I stammered, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. I've never seen this before in my life. I wrote every single word of my paper myself. He sighed, a sound that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. He looked at me not with anger, but with a deep, weary sadness that was somehow worse. Sophie, the digital footprint is clear. This paper has been online for years. The similarities are too extensive to be a coincidence. This is a clear-cut case of academic plagiarism. The word hit me like a physical blow. Plagiarism. It was the cardinal sin of academia. It was intellectual theft. It was a brand that would follow me forever. No, I whispered, shaking my head, a wave of nausea rolling over me. No, that's impossible. I swear to you I didn't do this. The evidence is incontrovertible, he said, his voice now cold and formal. I flagged this for the university's disciplinary board. You will be contacted for a formal hearing. I'm very disappointed in you, Sophie. I stumbled out of his office in a daze. The world felt tilted, unreal. The cheerful sounds of the campus, students laughing, the distant chime of the clock tower, seemed to mock me. How could this happen? It was impossible. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but there was none. It was a nightmare. As I cut across the main quad, my eyes blurry with unshed tears, I saw him. Ryan. He was holding court with his rugby friends, laughing at some joke, the king in his castle. He happened to look up, and his eyes met mine from across the manicured lawn. The laughter died on his lips. His friend's smiles remained, but his vanished. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable for a second. And then I saw it. Just a flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible upturn at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smile. It was a smirk. A quiet, knowing, triumphant smirk. And in that one, sickening, heart-stopping instant, I knew. I didn't know the how or the why, but I knew the who. It was him. My brother had done this to me. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. News in a university travels faster than wildfire, and rumors of plagiarism are the most flammable gossip of all. It started with whispers. I'd walk into the library, my sanctuary, and the quiet hum of studying would falter. Heads would lift from books, eyes would follow me as I walked to my usual corral, and then the hushed tones would resume. It felt like walking through a gauntlet of judgment every single day. People who used to smile and wave now avoided my gaze, their faces suddenly fascinated by their own shoes as I passed. In the dining hall, a girl from my seminar who once borrowed my notes now picked up her tray and moved to another table when I sat down. I was a pariah. I was the girl who cheated. The stain of the accusation was spreading, tainting every corner of my life. I felt like I was wearing a scarlet C on my chest for cheater, and it was glowing for all to see. The worst part was the isolation. My small group of friends grew distant. They didn't accuse me outright, but their doubt was a tangible thing, a wall of awkward silence between us. They'd offer weak, non-committal phrases like, "Wow, that's crazy," or "I'm sure it'll all get sorted out," before quickly changing the subject. They didn't want to be near the scandal. They didn't want to be near me. Driven by a desperate, nauseating certainty, I decided to confront Ryan. I found him in the living room of our shared off-campus house, lounging on the sofa, scrolling through his phone as if he didn't have a care in the world. "We need to talk," I said, my voice tight. He looked up, feigning surprise. Then he arranged his face into a mask of perfect, brotherly concern. "Soph!" "Hey, I heard what happened. That's awful. Are you okay?" His performance was flawless. He sounded so sincere that for a dizzying second, I almost doubted myself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this is all a terrible coincidence. But then I remembered the smirk. "Don't pretend you don't know what this is about, Ryan," I said, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Professor Albright's office. The plagiarism charge. Did you have something to do with it?" He sat up, his face a caricature of profound hurt. "What? Sophie, how could you even ask me that?" he said, his voice dripping with wounded indignation. "I'm your brother. Why on earth would I do something like that to you? I'm worried sick about you." He turned it back on me, expertly painting himself as the victim of my cruel, paranoid accusation. "I can't believe you'd think I was capable of that," he said, shaking his head sadly. "I'm on your side here." I left the room, my accusation shattered, my resolve crumbling. He was too good. No one would ever believe me. My last hope was my parents. I called them that night, my voice trembling as I tried to explain the impossible situation. I told them I was being framed, that I was innocent. They listened, but their questions were laced with the poison Ryan had already fed them. "Sophie, are you absolutely sure you didn't, accidentally use a source without citing it?" my father asked, his tone that of a disappointed manager speaking to a clumsy employee. "These things can be tricky. Ryan told us how stressed you've been," my mother added, her voice soft with pity, which felt worse than anger. "He said you've been pushing yourself too hard. Sweetheart, if you made a mistake, you just need to own up to it. People will respect your honesty." They had already tried and convicted me in their minds. Ryan, the ever-supportive son, had gotten to them first, framing the narrative. He was worried about his stressed-out little sister who had cracked under the pressure. I was the problem to be managed. He was the hero. I hung up the phone, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, and a feeling of profound, bottomless despair washed over me. I was completely and utterly alone. The nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a relentless carousel of shame, anger, and confusion. I'd replay the moment in Albright's office, the whispers in the library, the pained disappointment in my parents' voices. The injustice of it was a physical thing, a cold, heavy knot in my stomach that wouldn't dissolve. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were filled with faceless figures pointing and whispering. During one of these long, sleepless nights, I forced myself to stop panicking and start thinking. How? How could he have done it? He was clever, but he wasn't a hacker. He needed access. I retraced my steps. I wrote the paper on my laptop. I saved it on my hard drive and on my flash drive as a backup. The little blue flash drive. I carried it everywhere in my backpack. A backpack I often left on the kitchen table in our house. A house I shared with him. It was possible. It was so sickeningly, horrifyingly possible. A few days later, the turning point came, not with a bang, but with a whisper. I was in the campus coffee shop, tucked away in a quiet corner, trying to force myself to study for an exam I was sure I would soon be barred from taking. I was miserable, running on caffeine and despair. Then I heard his voice. Ryan's voice. He was at a table, just around the corner, hidden from my view by a large bookshelf, but his voice carried. He was with his friend Mike, and he was laughing. "You should have seen her face, man," Ryan said, his voice low but brimming with arrogant pride. "She looked like she'd seen a ghost." "I still can't believe you pulled it off," Mike said, sounding impressed. "It was so easy," Ryan bragged, and my blood ran cold. I froze, my coffee cup held halfway to my lips. I just swiped her flash drive from her bag one afternoon when she was in the shower. Copied the file. Then I found this dead history blog from 2010. Uploaded her whole paper, changed the post date to make it look old, and created a fake author profile. The best part? I sent an anonymous email to old man Albright myself, tipping him off. "You might want to check this student's work for similarities to Dr. Alastair Finch." He took the bait completely. Mike whistled. "Dude, that's cold." "Why though?" "Her grades don't affect you." There was a pause. When Ryan spoke again, his voice had lost its jovial tone, replaced by a low, venomous resentment that chilled me to the bone. "You don't get it. All my life, I'm the one busting my ass on the field, bringing trophies home, making connections. And all she does is sit in a library and read. But when we come home, all they talk about is her brilliant mind. Oh, Sophie got another A. Oh, Sophie might get a scholarship. It makes me sick. I just wanted to show everyone that she's not so perfect. That she can be brought down just like anyone else. Now, I'll probably get the departmental prize for top marks. The prize she was supposed to get. Every word was a hammer blow. The casual cruelty, the deep-seated jealousy, the sheer malice of it all. It wasn't a prank. It was a calculated act of destruction, born of a bitterness I never knew he possessed. My first instinct was to jump up, to storm around the bookshelf, and scream the truth for the whole coffee shop to hear. But I stopped myself. My hand was shaking, rattling the cup against the saucer. He'd deny it. Mike would back him up. It would be my word, the word of an accused plagiarist, against the golden boy. I would look hysterical, unhinged. No. A public confrontation would be a messy, emotional disaster. He had used a quiet, digital weapon to attack me. I needed to find one of my own. I looked down at my phone, at the voice memo app I'd never used. An idea began to form in my mind. It was cold, and it was sharp, and for the first time in weeks, the fog of despair began to clear, replaced by an icy, methodical rage. He thought he had destroyed me. He had no idea what he had just created. The woman who walked out of that coffee shop was not the same one who had walked in. The despair was gone, burned away by the white-hot flame of fury. The fear had been replaced by a chilling, crystal-clear purpose. Ryan had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated me. He saw me as quiet, passive and weak. He never imagined that my silence was not empty, but observational. And he was about to learn just how much I had been paying attention. My first stop was not the dean's office or my parents' house. It was a small, drab electronics store off campus. I stood in front of a display of digital voice recorders, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm. They ranged from cheap, bulky devices to sleek, covert pens. I chose one in the middle, small enough to be unnoticeable, powerful enough to capture a clear conversation from inside a pocket or a backpack. The little black rectangle felt cold and heavy in my palm. It was my first weapon. From that day on, the recorder was my constant companion. I carried it everywhere, its tiny red light always blinking, silently documenting my life. It was nestled in the pen holder of my backpack during the day, and it sat on my nightstand, still recording through the night. The first few days were a lesson in excruciating patience. I had to continue playing the part of the broken victim. I let my shoulders slump. I avoided eye contact. I spoke in a quiet, defeated monotone. I needed him to believe he had won, to let his guard down completely. The conversations were agonizing. He'd approach me with his sickening, feigned concern, the recorder silently capturing every word. "Hey, any news from the board?" he'd ask, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I've been thinking about you. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." "No," I'd mumble, keeping my eyes on the floor. "The hearing is next week." "Well, just be honest with them. They'll see you're a good person. It'll be okay." Listening to the recordings at night was torture. His hypocrisy, his casual lies, they were all there in perfect, digital clarity. But it wasn't enough. I had a confession I had overheard, but I didn't have him confessing to me. I needed to bait the hook. I needed to appeal to the one thing that was even bigger than his jealousy, his ego. I waited for a night when our parents were out of town, and it was just the two of us in the house. The perfect stage. I found him in the kitchen, grabbing a beer from the fridge. I had spent hours rehearsing my lines, my role. I leaned against the doorframe, making myself look small and hopeless. The recorder was in the front pocket of my hoodie, the tiny microphone pointed right at him. "Ryan," I began, my voice a carefully crafted whisper. "They're going to expel me. I got the official notice today. My hearing is just a formality." He turned, his expression of concern snapping into place. "Oh, sophomore. I'm so sorry. My whole life is over," I said, letting a tear slide down my cheek. "All those years of work gone. For my own sanity, I need to understand how it happened. It feels like I was outsmarted, like someone pulled off the perfect crime against me." I saw a flicker in his eyes, a flash of pride. I was stroking his ego, framing him as a brilliant mastermind. He took the bait. He took a sip of his beer and let out a long sigh, as if burdened by his own genius. "Look," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "You can't tell anyone I told you this. But you're not wrong. You were outsmarted. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face a mask of broken confusion. What do you mean? It's a dog-eat-dog world, Sophie, he said, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. He was enjoying this, the final twist of a knife. You've always had it easy, coasting on being the smart one. I just level the playing field. I showed Dad and Mom and all those professors that you're not as perfect as everyone thinks. It was a clever plan, you have to admit. That old blog, the fake author, it was flawless. But how did you get my paper? I whispered, feeding him the last piece of the puzzle. He laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. Your little blue flash drive. You leave it in your bag all the time. It was like taking candy from a baby. I just stared at him, letting the silence hang in the air as the recorder captured his triumphant, sociopathic confession. He thought he was explaining his victory to the vanquished. He had no idea he was dictating his own death sentence. I mumbled a thank you and fled to my room, my hands trembling not with fear, but with a surge of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I had it. Exhibit A. His own words. The recording was the core of my case, but I knew I needed more. A disgruntled brother's confession could be dismissed as a cruel joke, a lie he told to upset me. I needed a corroborating witness. My mind raced back through the weeks, trying to pinpoint the moment he could have taken the drive. He said it was easy, which meant I was probably distracted. Who was I with? And then it hit me. Maya. My best friend, Maya. The one person who had stood by me, who had said from the beginning, I don't believe it for a second, sophomore. We had been studying together in the lab the week before the paper was due. I remembered leaving my bag at our table with her while I went on a 15-minute coffee run. My hands shook as I dialed her number. Maya, I need you to think really carefully, I said the second she answered. Remember that Tuesday we were in the lab, and I went to get coffee? Did you see Ryan? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh my God, Sophie, she said, her voice suddenly sharp with realization. Yes, he came by the table. I thought it was weird. He said he was looking for you, and that you told him to grab a textbook out of your bag for him. What did he do? I asked, my breath catching in my throat. He unzipped the front pocket, rustled around for a minute, and then zipped it back up. He said, Never mind, it's not in there, and left. Soph, the flash drive. You keep your flash drive in that front pocket. Yes, I breathed, a wave of relief, so powerful it almost made me dizzy. Yes, I do. That absolute snake, Maya hissed. Of course, I'll testify. I will write down every single detail. I will tell them exactly what I saw. We're going to burn him to the ground. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't alone. I had a confession, and now I had a witness. I had a case. The official letter scheduling my disciplinary hearing arrived 2 days later. My mother cried when she saw the foreboding university crest on the envelope. My father gave me a stern lecture about facing the consequences of my actions. And Ryan, in a move of such breathtaking audacity it almost made me laugh, offered to accompany me to the hearing. For moral support, he said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. His touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin. Thank you, Ryan, I said, my voice meek. I'd really appreciate that. His presence wasn't a comfort. It was the final, crucial piece of my trap. The night before the meeting, I sat in my room in the dark, my laptop open. I listened to the audio file one last time. His voice, so full of arrogance and contempt. I read my assigned written statement, her words clear and precise. Everything was ready. The fear I had been living with for weeks was still there, a faint tremor deep inside me, but it was overshadowed by a vast, cold calm. I looked at my own reflection in the dark screen of the laptop. The scared, broken girl who had cried in Professor Albright's office was gone. In her place was an architect. Tomorrow, I wasn't walking into my execution. I was walking in to watch the foundations of my brother's world crumble. And I was the one who had laid the dynamite. The morning of the hearing was gray and overcast, the sky a perfect reflection of the mood in our house. The silence at the breakfast table was a living thing, thick and suffocating. My father read the newspaper with furious intensity. My mother nervously refilled coffee cups that were already full. And Ryan, my brother the betrayer, gave me a condescendingly supportive wink as I pushed my untouched toast around my plate. Just stay calm in there, Soph, he whispered as we walked out the door. It'll all be over soon. Oh, you have no idea how right you are, I thought. The walk across campus felt like a march to the gallows. Every face I passed seemed to be staring, whispering. The heavy oak door of the dean's office complex felt like the entrance to a tomb. Inside, the air smelled of old wood, floor polish, and grave importance. A grandfather clock in the hallway ticked with agonizing slowness, each tick a countdown to the moment my life would either be ruined or reclaimed. We were led into a conference room. It was just as intimidating as I had imagined. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the grim fluorescent lights above. On one side sat the tribunal, Professor Albright, looking weary and sad, Dr. Evanson, the stern head of the history department, and Dean Miller, a woman with a reputation for being tough but fair. Their faces were impassive, judicial. Ryan and I sat on the other side. He took the chair next to me, leaning in to give my shoulder a reassuring squeeze, a piece of theater for the benefit of the jury. I had to use every ounce of my self-control not to flinch away from his touch. The hearing began. Dean Miller formally read the charge of academic dishonesty, her voice a flat, emotionless drone. Dr. Evanson laid out the evidence. Printouts of my paper and the so-called original from the online journal, the damning similarities highlighted in yellow. The case against me seemed airtight, overwhelming. The weight of their collective disappointment was a physical pressure in the room. Miss Evans, Dean Miller said, her gaze fixing on me. This is an extremely serious accusation. Before the board deliberates, do you have any explanation for this? Before I could open my mouth, Ryan jumped in. His performance was masterful. He leaned forward, his hands clasped, his face a perfect mask of earnest sincerity. If I may, Dean Miller, he said, his voice filled with a carefully modulated tone of respect and concern. I just want to say that my sister, Sophie, is a good person. She's one of the most hard-working students at this university. She's been under an incredible amount of stress this semester. I know this doesn't excuse it, but I'm sure this is all a terrible mistake, and I know she has learned a profound lesson. Our family is just hoping for your leniency. She's not a bad person. She made a poor judgment call. He sat back, satisfied with his speech. He had painted the perfect picture for them. The fragile, overstressed little sister who had cracked under pressure, and the noble, protective older brother trying to save her. He was casting himself as my savior while simultaneously confirming my guilt. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the silence settle after his performance. Then I turned my head and looked at him. Thank you for your concern, Ryan, I said, my voice startlingly calm and clear in the quiet room. Then I turned back to the board. But I didn't make a mistake. I didn't make a poor judgment call. And I did not cheat. I saw a flicker of surprise in Dean Miller's eyes. Professor Albright leaned forward slightly. I was framed. I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. My paper was stolen, uploaded to the internet by a third party, and then I was anonymously reported to the department. It was a deliberate and malicious act of sabotage. Dr. Evanson frowned. Miss Evans, those are very strong allegations. Do you have any proof to support them? Yes, I said. I do. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small, black digital recorder. I placed it gently on the center of the polished table. The three of them stared at the device as if it were a venomous snake. Ryan's eyes widened, the first crack appearing in his confident facade. My brother has been very vocal about his support for me, I said, looking directly at Ryan, whose face was beginning to lose its color. But his story changes when he thinks no one is listening. I pressed the play button. Ryan's voice, not the concerned, sincere voice they had just heard, but his true voice, cocky, arrogant, and dripping with contempt, filled the silent office. It's a dog-eat-dog world, Sophie. You've always had it easy, coasting on being the smart one. I just leveled the playing field. It was a clever plan, you have to admit. That old blog, the fake author, it was flawless. Your little blue flash drive. You leave it in your bag all the time. It was like taking candy from a baby. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute, profound. It was the sound of a world shifting on its axis. I looked at Ryan. The color had completely drained from his face. He was a ghastly shade of pale, his mouth slightly agape, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated panic. He looked from the recorder to the faces of the professors, which had transformed from disappointment to shock, and then to a slow-burning, icy rage. That's not, he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. She tricked me. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. It's taken out of context. He's right, I said calmly, and for a second, a flicker of hope appeared in Ryan's terrified eyes. That recording doesn't explain how he got the flash drive. For that, I have a witness. I slid a folded piece of paper across the table. This is a signed statement from my friend, Maya Jensen. She's prepared to testify in person if needed. Dean Miller picked it up and read it aloud, her voice cold and hard. It detailed the exact time and place, how Ryan had approached my bag, his lie about needing a textbook, and how he had accessed the very pocket where I kept my flash drive. It was the final, irrefutable nail in his coffin. The room was quiet again. The three professors looked at my brother, the golden boy, and for the first time, they saw him for what he was, a petty, jealous fraud. Professor Albright looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a profound and unmistakable apology. Dean Miller placed the statement down on the table. She folded her hands and fixed her cold, furious gaze on my brother. "Mr. Evans," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument, "I believe this hearing is concluded, and I believe you are the one who will be facing the disciplinary board." Leaving that office was like walking out of a pressure cooker. I stepped into the hallway, and the gray, overcast day suddenly seemed bright. The air, which had felt so heavy and suffocating, now felt light and clean in my lungs. Ryan was left behind in the room, his world imploding in silence. I didn't look back. The aftermath was swift and decisive. All charges against me were dropped, accompanied by a formal, written apology from the department and from Professor Albright personally. Ryan was suspended from the university for a full year. His name was stripped from the dean's list, and the departmental prize he so coveted was quietly awarded to the runner-up. His reputation on campus, so carefully cultivated, was shattered overnight. He went from being the charismatic big man on campus to a pariah, a cheat who had tried to ruin his own sister. The real reckoning, however, happened at home. The dean had called our parents. The confrontation was not loud or explosive. It was something worse, a heavy, heartbroken silence. For the first time, my parents were forced to see the truth they had refused to acknowledge for years. The son they had placed on a pedestal was a cruel, manipulative liar. The quiet daughter they had so often overlooked possessed a core of integrity and strength they had never bothered to see. Their perfect family portrait was shattered, and the pieces could never be put back together in the same way. Our relationship is different now. It's strained and awkward, but it's more honest. They look at me with a new, painful respect. They are trying to see me, Sophie, not just the shadow of my brother. As for me, the victory wasn't in Ryan's downfall. The victory was in my own vindication. Walking across campus now, I hold my head high. The whispers are gone. The looks of pity have been replaced by looks of respect. But most importantly, I proved my own worth to the only person who ever truly mattered, myself. I realized my quiet nature was never a weakness. It was my greatest strength. It allowed me to watch, to listen, and to learn. While Ryan was busy commanding the stage, I was in the audience, studying his every move, his every weakness. And when the time came, I didn't need to shout. The truth, I learned, is a weapon that makes its own noise. And when it finally speaks, its voice is the loudest one in the room. Sometimes the quietest people have the most to say. They're just waiting for the right moment to say it. Have you ever been underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where the truth hits back hard.